declaramos y definimos como santos los beatos Francisco Marto y Jacinta Marto.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Michael Matt down in the catacombs. So, great. I'm delighted, of course, that Francisco and Jacinta have been canonized. It's a long time coming. But you know what? I'd be lying if I didn't admit that, for me at least, the shine has, well, it's sort of come off the halo, so to speak, when it comes to the modern canonization process, which is really, let's face it, it's been pretty trivialized over the past 20 years. Now that they've removed, one of the, or they've gone from three miracles required, I guess it is now, Rob, down to one. They don't have a, yeah, and the miracles oftentimes are quite suspect, if you don't mind me saying. The devil's advocate, of course, has been removed, and all these things. It's just kind of sad to see that happen. I used to be, I'm sure you agree with me on this, Rob, I used to be so proud of the fact that the Catholic Church was really hesitant to accept claims of miracles or to rush to judgment either way when it came to canonizations of saints. It was a good thing. It was a very rigorous process where a lot of fact-checking went on, and it could take hundreds of years. Heck, it took 400 years to canonize the great St. Thomas More, who was a martyr who gave his life for the theology of the papacy, for the church. He lost his head for that. But the church, still allowed 400 years to pass before raising him to the altars. St. Thomas More. That's not so much the case anymore. And I think it's really sad, even in this case, where canonization, I think, is warranted, obviously, right? I mean, we're talking about Jacinta and Francisco, for heaven's sakes. Marto, they certainly are in heaven. Our Lady assured us that they would go to heaven. They were two victim souls who conversed with the Mother of God. So, in this case, of course, they're in. And the Vatican's saint-making factory could hardly go wrong in the case of Jacinta and Francisco. But it doesn't change the fact that the canonization process itself is just not what it used to be, which is why the press coverage of this double canonization was really pretty minimal in this case in Fatima. The attitude was sort of ho-hum. The Pope cranked out a couple of new saints, whoever they are. What else is new? And that's because canonization, it just isn't what it used to be. Nothing is. But there were other issues that happened during the Pope's visit that left a lot of people sort of scratching their heads as he dropped one Bergoglianism after another along the way. The prayer, for example, that he recited during the canonization of the two Fatima seers, that prayer places Papa Bergoglio himself right there at the heart of the third secret of Fatima, at least the version of the third secret of Fatima that was released by the Vatican back in 2000. Francis prayed the following, quote, "As a bishop dressed in white, I remember all those who, robed in the baptismal white, want to live in God and pray the mysteries of Christ to attain peace," end quote. Did you get that, Rob?
So he was the one in the...
The bishop in white, he's the one. Yeah, isn't that nice? It's pretty convenient, at least according to him. He's referring, of course, to the version of the third secret published in June 26 of 2000, which included reference to this bishop dressed in white. It seems to me that poor Francis just has to put his stamp on everything now, even taking it upon himself, by the way, to tell the world that Our Lady, in fact, is not holding back the arm of her son anymore. Did you catch this one?
No.
I have a little bit of footage of that. Let's take a look.
¿Cuál, María? Una maestra de vida espiritual, o então una santinha a quem se recorre para obter favores abaixo preso?
Pope Francis said that neither does justice to God or the Virgin, nor does the image of Mary that stops the just arm of God ready to punish.
Grande injustiça fazemos a Deus e a sua graça. cuando se afirma en primer.
Now that's a curious turn of phrase. Where have I heard that before? Oh, that's right. That's right. That is exactly how the Mother of God described herself at La Salette. Remember? Quote, "If my people do not wish to submit themselves, I am forced to let go of my son's arm. It is so heavy and weighs me down so much that I can no longer hold it back." End quote. So says Our Lady of La Salette. So much for La Salette. Francis thinks that's kind of silly. So much for the heart and soul of the Fatima message, too. Because the message basically is that God will levy every manner of punishment on humanity, that nations will be annihilated and souls will be lost for all eternity unless Our Lady's requests are granted. So she does, in fact, occupy a singular position with respect to God's mercy and his judgment and his justice. So much for all of that. In one fell swoop, Pope Francis has undermined the message of Fatima and the message of La Salette. But wait, Rob, there's more. Pope Francis also had something to say about Our Lady of Medjugorje while he was traveling to Fatima. Yeah, interesting. Now, before I even comment on that, I'm no fan of Medjugorje, the so-called apparitions that are supposedly happening there. In fact, 20 years ago, I published a book by Michael Davies called Medjugorje After 15 Years, which is based on Mr. Davies' exchanges with the Bishop of Mostar, in which really, if you read that book, any logical reader is left with the very distinct impression that probably nothing is going on at Medjugorje other than, to some extent, a hoax. But let's just take a look at this. Is this any way for a pope to handle the alleged apparitions at Medjugorje? Take a look at this.
Le apparizioni, le presunte apparizioni attuali, l'informe ha I suoi dubbi. Io personalmente sono più cattivo. Io preferisco la Madonna Madre, nostra Madre, e non la Madonna capo di ufficio telegrafico che tutti i giorni invia un messaggio a tal ora, e questa non è la mamma di Gesù.
I'm sorry, but here the Pope is mocking something that is very sacred to a lot of good people. Now, they're lost sheep, too. They've been abandoned by 50 years of the spirit of Vatican II and the new Mass and heterodoxy from the pulpit and all the rest. But they're longing to believe in something, even false apparitions, finally, to fill the void where the Catholic Church used to be. And I think that they, in justice, can expect that the Pope is going to handle this, their apparition of Our Lady that they really truly believe in. He's going to handle this in a manner that's slightly more papal, more dignified. And some of my friends are saying, well, now finally the Pope has slammed the door on Medjugorje. No, he hasn't. Just because we happen to agree with him in this case about Medjugorje, this doesn't change the fact that papal opinions and papal chit-chat on an airplane during a presser are not binding on anyone. This has just sort of offended a lot of people, and nothing's settled. Just another papal gaffe. Only this time it takes out the poor folks who think that Our Lady is appearing at Medjugorje. Now, the last time it was people who were breeding like rabbits that the Holy Father had a little funny comment for. Before that, it was the Neo-Pelagian, rigid traditional Catholics that he poked fun at. Since when do popes behave this way, in this casual manner? And yet, once again, despite all of this trip to Fatima, another pope back in Fatima making news, looking pious, but again, incredibly ignoring the very thing that the Queen of Heaven has been waiting for since 1929, when she made it known to Sister Lucia, you all know the story, that the Holy Father was to consecrate Russia to the Immaculate Heart of Mary. Why? That's not for us to ask. That's just what happened. She asked for the consecration of Russia specifically. And it still has not happened. But don't you think that those two seers of Fatima would prefer that Our Lady's requests would finally and at long last just be obeyed as she asked? Especially when the world now continues to blow up all over the place, exactly as Our Lady of Fatima predicted that it would if those requests were not met. Is anyone thinking, are they paying any attention here? Russia's in the news, Israel's in the news, Fatima's in the news, and no one's connecting the dots. But Fatima's not going away. Isn't that interesting? Look what's happening in politics. Look at our poor world. Look at President Trump, for heaven's sakes. The poor guy, you can just sort of sense that the warmongers and the baby killers and the anti-marriage and the anti-family crowd, they are not going to let up until this guy is either dead or impeached. He's like a racehorse that's not being allowed out of the gate. He's got a lot of ideas. He's going to be really fast. He's going to put in a good performance here, but the gates are shut and he can't get out. So he's still sitting there fighting these ridiculous battles with the press. And why is that? Because the press, because the powers that be, it can all be boiled down to abortion, gay marriage, and contraception. The folks that put Trump into office are against abortion. They're in favor of marriage, the Christian idea of marriage, and they got a guy named Donald Trump in the office. This doesn't have much to do with poor Donald Trump. He has no idea what kind of a whirlwind or storm he's in the middle of right now. It has to do with all the folks that got him in, because Trump represents a step back in this demonic effort to abort half the world, to destroy marriage and the families. That's what this is all about. And right in the middle of it, this poor guy Trump doesn't know if he's coming or going anymore. And it's getting worse. I just heard today that Israel's housing and construction minister, Yoav Gallant, is calling for the assassination of Syrian President Bashar Assad, following last week's U.S. State Department report that the Syrian regime was using a prison crematorium to hide mass killings outside of Damascus. So here we go again, gassing his own citizens, crematoriums, the whole bit. Haven't we heard all this before? He's gassing his own citizens. Really? Does no one want to look into that just a little bit more to find out what's going on? Has anyone even bothered to ask why? Why would this guy be gassing his own citizens willy-nilly? What's to be gained from this? Might there just not be a tiny bit more to the story? We're queuing up the new Saddam Hussein, the new Osama bin Laden, the new bad guy, because it's time to declare another war on another guy, by the way, who out of everyone in the region, regardless of what else he's doing right or wrong or what kind of a man we think he is, at the moment he's protecting Christians in his country. This is beyond doubt. Syria currently houses over 2.2 million Christians. Anybody thinking about them? For nearly 2,000 years, Syrian Christianity has flourished. Denominations include the Greek and the Syriac Orthodox churches, the Armenian Apostolic Church, the Roman, Armenian, Syrian, and Chaldean Catholic churches, and the Assyrian Nestorian Church. They're all over the place over there, the Christians, our brothers and sisters who are Christians. And the best chances that these poor Christian folks have of living to see next week is this guy, their president. Whether you like him or whether I like him or not, we don't know a lot about him, do we? Because we're not allowed to. But the best chance that they have to see next week is their president, who is protecting their families and their homes against ISIS rebels and Al-Qaeda and Al-Qaeda and everybody else. Now the Al-Nusra Front rebels as well. The Christians in Syria, they don't have CNN. They don't know that Assad is gassing his own people again. For heaven's sakes, good grief. Are we really going to go down this rabbit hole again? Gassing his own people? Because Shepard Smith says it must be true and Anderson Cooper agrees? Really? We're not going to look into it any more than that, and yet we're going to suddenly, as the American people, rise up again and tell our president to go over there and bomb the hell out of people? Because Shepard Smith or some talking head on TV said that the president needs to go and he's gassing his own people. Take a look at the other side of the story. Take a look at this.
Home to an Orthodox shrine, a 4th century Catholic church and dozens of mosques, this town's religious heritage is solid. Its residents, the legacy's keepers, have a specific explanation of this luck.
God saves us. This tragedy didn't come to us because God loves this city.
We are afraid that these people will come here to try to disturb us and destroy our peaceful life, as they did in Homs and many cities. But we trust the army and security and state.
For decades, the government of President Bashar al-Assad, who is himself from the Shia Islam minority Alawi sect, has protected the interests of 10% of the country's population who are Christians by enforcing its strictly secular program and by curbing the influence of radicalism.
There were people here. They wanted to push us against the government, the president, the army. If you hear the army enter the city and kill people, believe me, this is a mistake. The army is here to protect people. God bless Assad. He did a lot to protect this state and make it strong.
Fears mount, though, that these efforts will not be enough, with increasing calls for foreign intervention and the arming of the opposition. A no-win fight would be tragic.
So, for the last time, folks, we know this. We know it's true when the press tells us how many people didn't show up for the Right to Life march in D.C., right? We question that. We question almost everything until the war machine gets cranked up. Then we just put our questioning brains on hold. It's time that we question everything that the mainstream media says. We know this, and it applies to Syria as well. Everything. Question it. Look into it before you get on the war machine again. You know, finally tonight we got a bit of good news. If you'll remember from last week, that high school assistant principal cursing out the Christian pro-life kids outside of a public school. Well, this lunatic was not only put on leave, but it turns out that the kids who caught him on tape are a couple of awesome homeschoolers that were out there doing the right thing.
The public school principal is on leave tonight for screaming at teenagers who dared to oppose abortion. Watch this.
You can go get a freaking life.
These children are being murdered in our society.
They're not children, they're cells.
They're children.
Go home!
It's exposing the Holocaust that's happening in America.
There's no Holocaust happening in America.
There actually is.
Talk about a Holocaust happening in America, go into an inner city and talk to the poor and underprivileged.
These are image bearers of God.
You can go to hell where they are too.
Ruff, who apparently is an actual person, has since been placed on leave. Connor and Lauren Haynes join us tonight. Thanks all for coming on, both of you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Do you go to this school? And just give us, set the scene for us a little bit. How did this happen? Who was this guy?
Yeah, so we actually don't go to that school. I'm homeschooled, and we decided to go out to Downingtown West High School because they had a Holocaust symposium. So we thought it'd be a perfect opportunity to talk about abortion, which we consider the Holocaust of our day.
So, Lauren, did you all attack this guy, or did he just come at you? Does the video represent what happened?
We actually were not planning on going to STEM. We were planning on going to the other high school, and it was definitely God had his hand in that situation, and he wanted us there. We believe to be able to speak into his life, and we were standing there, and then he came out about 5 minutes after we'd been standing there.
Huh. Were you all using profanity or attacking anybody or doing anything that would offend a normal person?
Well, besides the fact that the gospel of Jesus Christ does offend people, no, we were not, cursing or banging on windows or anything.
Way to go, guys, and let's hear it for homeschoolers everywhere and in general. The hope of the future. Great work. Dear Mr. Matt, I spent the last few years studying the history and teaching of the Catholic Church and its claim of being the one true Church of Jesus Christ, and had reached the conclusion that the claim was true. I was leaning heavily towards converting, but when my research brought me to the modern era in the Catholic Church, I found to my surprise that the current Church, and the current Pope in particular, no longer believe in evangelizing non-Catholics and are proponents of the same Pentecostal charismatic errors that I had decided some time ago to abandon. I talked to the sister in charge of the RCIA program at my local Catholic parish, but she seemed oddly unenthusiastic about adding me to the flock. I then looked a little closer into the RCIA program, and what I found left me with an uncomfortable feeling. My converting to Catholicism would cause a lot of personal problems in my life since my wife's family has a deep anti-Catholic bias. I do want to do it if I can, and I pray the rosary every evening and wear the miraculous medal around my neck as I try to decide. Taking all of this into consideration, should I still convert to a church which no longer seems Catholic, and if so, how do I do it? Sincerely, Mr. G. What do you do with this one, Rob?
I'll let you handle that.
Yeah. Welcome to the Titanic, Mr. G. I mean, this is a tough call. You're making the right decision. You're being given the grace. But this letter just provides another example of just how well things are going in the old post-conciliar Church of Accompaniment. I would suggest that our viewers who have problems like this, give us a call over at the Remnant newspaper, and we'll hook you up with a good priest who's still practicing the faith, which is nice. And it's kind of nice, wouldn't you say? Would you say, Rob? I mean, I sort of like it when my priests are still Catholic. I mean, it's not absolutely necessary, I suppose. No. I don't think so. But it's nice, and it's fun. It's kind of fun. Reach out to us at the Remnant newspaper, Mr. G, and we'll put you in touch with a good priest. That's it. So it goes, folks. I'm Michael Matt down in the catacombs, and we'll see you next week.